What's going on YouTube? It's Tej back again with another video, and today I'm bringing you my tier list ranking for each team's NFL draft performance from this past weekend. Had a couple of days to think about it, sit on it, review the list of draft picks, and now I am ready to quote-unquote make a verdict. But this is just my opinion, so down in the comments section below, tell me where your favorite team should be ranked if I have it wrong, or what teams you think performed better than I have given them credit, and who performed worse than where I have them in here. Hopefully you enjoyed today's video. If you do, please hit that like button. And if you're new to the channel, like sports content, both IRL and, Madden, MLB The Show, all that content's about to start kicking back up here in the coming weeks. So if any of that sounds great to you, please consider subscribing. It would mean the world to me. Awesome. Without further ado, we're going to be doing this in alphabetical order. So we start with the Arizona Cardinals. And I think it was a B caliber class, right? I'm a little confused about Zaven Collins, but at its minimum, he's a great football player. Can be used in a lot of different ways. If he's just going to be an edge rusher, that's kind of intriguing as like a long-term replacement to Marcus Golden. Okay. Feels like at 16 they could have done something a little different. Maybe a Christian Barmore. Someone I just know how they're going to fit in that defense would have given me more assurance. But nonetheless, I know Zaven Collins is a good football player. Then you get Rondale Moore in the second round. I think he's a really nice addition to that offense. You can do a lot of different things with him. I think Cliff Kingsbury, hopefully this is going to be the making of a new trend where Cliff Kingsbury gets a little bit more creative with how he uses his wide receivers, because Rondale Moore is a gadget player first. So if Cliff Kingsbury is just going to line him up in the slot and that's going to be the end of it, that is just a wasted resource. Marco Wilson, a guy with some high upside. Don't forget when he got to Florida, he's same recruiting class as CJ Henderson. Wilson walked, once he stepped onto campus, I'm not saying he's walked on, but once he stepped onto campus, he was starting over CJ Henderson. Obviously, things have played out, and there's a reason Marco Wilson's a 4th round pick this year, and CJ Henderson was the 9th overall pick last year. But nonetheless, there are some pieces to be worked with there in Marco Wilson. Also, I'm a huge Tay Gowan fan. I'm gonna die on this hill. I feel like Tay Gowan in the 6th round is one of the best steals of this draft. I am telling you, I had him going in the 3rd round in some of my mocks. I like what I see on tape. He's got the size, he's got the frame, he's got the athletic ability, and I know he only played 1 year at UCF, but it was also a fantastic year of performance. And then he had to be an adult. That's why he opted out in 2020. He had to do responsible things. I can respect that. But I'm going to give it a B for Arizona. Also, for context, I'm largely going to talk about teams' first 3 rounds, first 4 rounds, top 100 picks. That's where you're going to make or break the draft. And then there's a few teams with players later on, like Tay Gowan here with Arizona, that I will make mention of. But moving on to our second team, the Atlanta Falcons, headlined by Kyle Pitts. Then they grab Richie Grant in the 2nd, ahead of Trevon Moehrig, but other than that, I still think Grant's a really good addition to that secondary. They needed a safety big time. Jalen Mayfield, I think, kicks inside to play guard, which is kind of the one spot this team was missing. Darren Hall was probably a little early. Drew Dahlman, some center competition. Maybe there's an open competition between him and others in camp. So this team went an approach of addressing the offensive line, but also getting a playmaker in Pitts and adding a safety. I'm going to give it a B. Again, Kyle Pitts is a fantastic player, but I just wish they could have traded down. I know it takes two teams to trade, so don't give me that lecture. But try to find some other value. Try to get it to where, since you're moving back, the cap room situation's alleviated some, because now I feel like they have to trade Julio Jones, which that inherently makes this team a little bit worse, despite how good Kyle Pitts is going to be. But if they could have traded down and focused more on defense, gotten like a Trevon Moehrig, or if they really like Richie Grant, that's fine. But like an edge rusher as well in round 1, or Micah Parsons if they traded down to 9, or whatever the case may have been. I just think there was a little bit better of a draft potentially in the works in Atlanta. But the one they have with Pitts, Grant, Mayfield, Dahlman, some of the big names, it's certainly worthy of being a B. And then we get to the Baltimore Ravens. This kills me. I hate to do this, but this was an S-tier draft, right? What did we say coming into the weekend? Other than right tackle. Outside of right tackle, because Orlando Brown was just traded, what do we say this team's 2 biggest needs were? A big body, wide receiver with a big catch radius to make the game easier for Lamar Jackson. Also, I'll add that I think it helps Mark Andrews as well. but big body wide receiver, and then also edge rusher. What were their first 2 picks in round 1? Rashad Bateman, the exact wide receiver we wanted them to take. This was like a dream come true for Baltimore. And then Jason Owe, or Odedefe Owe, however I think he's going to go by his actual legal name moving forward. So Odedefe Owe, super high upside edge rusher, freak athlete, goes to a team that develops edge rushers better than anybody. That's an A right there. Like, it didn't matter what you did after that. Then they go out there and get Ben Cleveland, who I think is a tremendous fit for that offensive line. I don't know if he plug and plays at left guard, but with the addition of Kevin Zeitler at right guard, I think Cleveland could potentially also be a starter at left guard, and you're just adding on to the strength in which your running game has. Brandon Stevens, maybe a little early. Tylan Wallace, though, that's fantastic value in the 4th round. I cannot believe they got him as well. And then Shaun Wade, I'm interested to see how they use him, because I think he could make the move to safety, which was after wide receiver, outside linebacker. It went right tackle to replace Orlando Brown, and then safety, in my opinion, for this team's biggest needs. Maybe center is in there, but I just don't value the center position as much. But I think Shaun Wade has what it takes to play safety at the NFL. But even if he doesn't, this team has fantastic corners on the outside, and Peters and Humphrey. Shaun Wade, 2018 tape, 2018 to 2019, nickel corner spot was amazing. He was the best nickel corner, and there was a reason coming into this draft we thought he could be a first round guy, maybe the first or second corner off the board. Because if he was as good in the nickel as he was, because he could have been on the outside, that's a first round guy. But clearly it looks like he's just a slot corner specialist, which in a 3 wide receiver, 3 cornerback league, there is a role for Shaun Wade. And if he's working with Marlon Humphrey and Marcus Peters every day, I also like that for him. Also, I'm a Notre Dame fan, so I am biased in saying this, but Dalen Hayes, I'm really happy he ended up in Baltimore. Again, this is a team that produces edge rushers really well, so they addressed all their big needs except for right tackle, but we've already been talking about Alejandro Villanueva potentially signing and taking over that role for him, so I think the Ravens knocked out of the park. It's an S-tier draft for me. Next up, the Buffalo Bills. This one's an interesting one. This was such a project draft, right? Like, they draft Greg Rousseau and then Carlos Basham. I think Basham is more ready to play right now. And then Greg Rousseau, just like AJ Epineza last year, just in different ways and different players, obviously. But projects, you need to refine their skills. And one of these guys feels like they're going to kick inside. Maybe it's Epineza, maybe it's Rousseau. We also already have Ed Oliver, who I think is going to make that leap in year 3 that a lot of Bills fans have been waiting for. Then they take Spencer Brown, who has the skill set, the size, the strength to be a every down, all-pro, Pro Bowl level tackle. He has the build. He fits the mold of what you would expect a Pro Bowl left or right tackle, to look like. He's just not there yet. He's just simply not good enough to do that. So Brown is your project there and a potential replacement long-term to Darrell Williams. And then Tommy Doyle, I think, is going to be this team's like Swiss Army knife across the offensive line. When injuries pile up, Tommy Doyle is going to go and fill those roles. Also like DeMar Hamlin. I think that's a pretty solid 6th round pick. So got to give it an I was going to give it an A. Yeah, I think at this point, this team, again, I think I comped this with their edge rushing position in my last video. If you haven't seen it, go check it out. To what the Buccaneers did with cornerbacks, where they loaded up on CBs year after year, even though that necessarily wasn't the biggest need on the team. But it put them in a position to where they were last year, and those guys are in year 2 and 3, and Jamel Dean and Carlton Davis, and they're playing at a high level, and it helps you get to a Super Bowl and win a ring. So I think that's kind of what the Bills are doing, just with edge rushers, and then also offensive line. So building up the trenches, that's kind of the area where this team hasn't hit in their rebuild as hard. But with a limited amount of needs, this team is positioning themselves to minimize weaknesses later on. This was a very BPA-based draft and developmental-based draft. So I'm going to give the Bills an A. I think it was a pretty solid draft class. Then we get to the Panthers. Yeah, I got to put them in A as well. Also, for the reference, you're not going to see anybody in D. I don't think there was any D caliber class. Even teams like Seattle, who had limited picks, Houston didn't have that many. Well, Houston had a decent amount of later picks, but Seattle's a good example. I think they did enough with those picks to avoid D tier. So there's not going to be anybody in D tier. Sorry. But anyways, on to the Panthers. J.C. Horn's an interesting pick. I thought it would be Surtain if they went corner. But I think this team wants to eventually play more man press. I think every team wants to play more man press on those big, 3rd down and 6s when you're in the 4th quarter, games on the line. You want Horn to come up and jam the wide receiver. You want Troy Pride Jr. to do the same thing on the other side, and that's kind of his strength. So this team needed a corner, and they could have gone Rashawn Slater, but instead Matt Rule continued to take defensive players. And J.C. Horn, I think, is, in a lot of people's eyes, he was CB1, just given his upside and what he can do as a man-press corner. You try to work on everything else, specifically his zone coverage ability. And then the first offensive player taken by Matt Rule is a Joe Brady one at that. It's wide receiver Terrence Marshall. I think you play him in the slot. You could also play DJ Moore. Terrence Marshall has that inside-out versatility. Really like this addition. This is the replacement to Curtis Samuel. Not really in skill set, but as a wide receiver who can fill that type of role and that production that you lost with Curtis Samuel. I think DJ Moore ultimately becomes the gadget guy that Curtis Samuel was. Maybe not lining up in the backfield, but end arounds, jet sweeps, all those things. Brady Christensen, he could start sooner rather than later. Maybe not week 1. Maybe you ride out with Greg Little for a little bit, see if he's improved. But if he hasn't, then Brady Christensen steps in, and I think that's going to be that's good planning for what might not work on your team. Because if Little's bad and you didn't have a backup plan, you're not going to make it that far, especially in the NFC, like in the grand scheme of things. But if you have Christensen ready to go, backing him up, you're putting yourself in a position to be able to compete if Little isn't good. Also like the pick of Tommy Tremble, Chuba Hubbard, that's fine. And then Davion Nixon is a steal in the 5th round. You pair him up with Derek Brown, the run-stopping nose, and then Nixon, pass-rushing interior disruptor. Those two in between Brian Burns and Hassan Reddick. Sign me up. I'm all about it. I'm totally here for it. That was amazing value for Carolina. So they get an A. And then we get to the Chicago Bears. I know they made some trade-ups, so they had to work with limited quantity, and they sold a little bit of the future, specifically for the pick of Justin Fields. But we've been saying this team's a QB away, and they got the 3rd best player, in my opinion, in the draft, 3rd best quarterback as well. Then they trade up in the 2nd round to get Tevin Jenkins. Plug and play starter at right tackle. And realistically, if you're going to move on from Leno or Massey, I think you'd prefer to move on from Massey at right tackle or Ifedi, whoever was projected to start at right tackle for Chicago. I think that was a bigger area of need compared to where Charles Leno is. Leno is, not great, but a little bit further along, a little bit more polished than the options at right tackle. So love that. And they didn't really have to move up and give up that much to move up and take Jenkins, but they could have stayed pat where they were at, I think, 52. And gotten Dylan Radunz or someone like that, but you never know how the draft's going to play out. They saw a guy who was a 1st-round talent. I'm going to move up, make sure we get him before there's a potential run on tackles and offensive linemen, and we're stuck where like the Colts were in round 1. Also like the addition of Khalil Herbert. Don't know the role he'll carve out, but I am a Khalil Herbert fan. Daz Newsome, another wide receiver in the mix. And then Thomas Graham, very scheme versatile corner. Obviously, you lost Kyle Fuller. I'm not saying Thomas Graham is a 6th-round pick as your Kyle Fuller replacement, but he eventually could be. And then also Khyiris Tonga, a really good nose tackle. So I think the Bears knocked this one out of the park. Ryan Pace did everything he needed and then some to keep his job. Then we get to the Bengals, and I think they did a fantastic job as well. I think I got to put them in A. Starting with Ja'Marr Chase, I'm not going to argue Chase over Sewell. I think both would have been great options, but they found decent offensive line options later. Could have gone better directions, but they still addressed it. Ja'Marr Chase is a once-in-a-lifetime wide receiver. You add him in with T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd. You've heard it 1,000 times. And this is a Joe Burrow pick, right? Like Aaron Rodgers getting irritated with Green Bay. This felt like the Bengals saying, "Okay, let's do a little bit of let's do what we can to keep Joe Burrow happy." Obviously, Burrow on a rookie contract doesn't have the leverage that Rodgers does, but still, it's good to have that goodwill moving forward. And then Jackson Carman, maybe a little bit earlier than I thought he would go, and went ahead of names like Dylan Radunz and Brady Christensen, or even someone like Liam Eichenberg, I think was still on the board here. But nonetheless, they get a guy who I think is going to play guard. So obviously we could see him starting week 1 if he is playing guard, or he might just be a developmental right tackle to replace Riley Reif next year. Either way, like the way of thinking. Joseph Osai, they haven't listed as a D-end here on ESPN, where I'm looking at all these draft classes. But I'm thinking of 4-3. I kind of like him more as a blitzing outside linebacker. Obviously, he played a majority of his career at Texas as a stand-up linebacker. So you feel comfortable with him playing in space, and then he has the explosiveness to blitz, and a lot of his production in Texas came on stunts, rushing against the interior. which he would do as like a 4-3 Sam or 4-3 Will. So I think that's more the role, but we'll see. If he plays DN, that's interesting. And then they take another defensive end, which also signals to me I think Osai probably plays linebacker. Not that you can't take 2 DNs in a class, but Cameron Sample, fantastic value to start off day 3. That was their first of 3 fourth-round picks, which I think they all got good value. Cam Sample, Tyler Shelvin, and then Deonta Smith. Smith, project tackle. Don't need him right away. Develop him. In a couple years' time, maybe he does have a role. Maybe he's the long-term right tackle to replace Riley Reiff. Shelvin, they already have DJ Reader, but injuries happen across the defensive line. Shelvin's a fantastic run stopper. Goal line situations will also find a role. And then Cameron Sample, an explosive edge guy, needs to be refined, but super high upside there and a potential Hubbard replacement. And then also, last one I'll talk about, Chris Evans, everybody's sleeper of the draft, feels like, which doesn't make him a sleeper in my opinion, but this guy is a carbon copy of Giovanni Bernard, who they don't have anymore. So fantastic draft for Cincinnati. I think this is a year where Zach Taylor, if he can't get to 8-8, we might see this team move on from him as a head coach. But this was a good draft that put that team in a position to go maybe 7-9, 8-8 kind of territory. Cleveland, maybe the best draft class of anybody. Another AFC North team in S tier, killing me as a Steelers fan. But nonetheless, Greg Newsome, great pick. It was one of those that you didn't see a whole lot of mocks, but when the pick was made, you were like, yep, I like it. That makes total sense. Have him opposite of Denzel Ward, also have Greedy Williams in the room. And then they move up in the second round to get Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, who I thought they could take at 26. Instead, they get him at 52. Maybe the steal of the draft. Anthony Schwartz. I had plenty of Browns fans saying, we need a field stretcher. We need someone who's straight speed. You got it. Anthony Schwartz is just that. James Hudson, I think he's going to be the replacement of Jack Conklin. I think in 2 years' time is when Conklin's contract is up. Maybe it's at the end of next season, but in a lot of my mocks, I had them going interior offensive line. Players to replace like a Joel Bitonio in 2 years' time. J.C. Treader also in 2 seasons. But James Hudson's the same thing, just going to be the Jack Conklin replacement at right tackle. This team's built on the offensive line. I totally get it, but it's impossible to pay 5 offensive linemen. And then also Baker Mayfield's going to have to come off his rookie contract eventually. You have other big names waiting to get big mega deals. So if you can save money eventually by moving on from Conklin, Hudson takes over there. I think he really does fit well at right tackle. That's good planning. Tommy Togiai, extra nose tackle for this team. And then Richard LeCounte, an additional safety. I don't know if he sees the field, but LeCounte's not bound. And then Demetric Felton is running back wide receiver thing. That's just BPA. And Kevin Stefanski's a really creative play caller, so I kind of interested to see how he uses Felton. But that's an S tier draft if I've ever seen one for Cleveland. On to the Dallas Cowboys. I'll go with I'll give them a B. That's maybe a little bit on the favorable, the low side, but I have reasons why. I love the Micah Parsons fit. Gave that an A to an A+ in my first round grades video. Kelvin Joseph, the upside's there, right? Like if this guy didn't have any of the off the field concerns, he's probably CB 4 or 5 right there with Greg Newsome, maybe even ahead of him. But because of the off the field concerns, obviously you have to take that in consideration. Osa Odigizua, I am one to say that the Cowboys could improve at interior rusher. I think Neville Gallimore gets better in year 2. He's still nothing to write home about. I totally get that he's nothing special. But I felt like this team needed a nose tackle, which they eventually did get in Quinton Bahana. But that's in 6th round. Is he really going to be that much of an improvement compared to what you already have? I don't know. Here in the 3rd round, you could have taken a guy like Togiai, who we just talked about with the team prior to this with the Browns. But Osa Odigizua might be an improvement over Neville Gallimore, so that still warrants something. Felt a little early for both Chauncey Golston and Nahshon Wright. Plenty of people have been ragging on the Nahshon Wright pick. And then Jabril Cox in the 4th round, though. That's when I was kind of stalling there, B or A. Jabril Cox made me want to go up to A tier. I think this team might move on from Jalen Smith and that big contract again. Kind of like we were talking about the Browns. This team, now that you're paying Dak Prescott, you're going to have to try to find different ways to pay those big name players. And I think Jalen Smith might be on his way out, but I don't know who trades for that big contract. And also Leighton Vander Esch has injury concerns, so can you move on from him? But I don't know. They're saying Keanu Neal's going to stay at linebacker, and I see 5 linebackers with 3 linebacking positions in a 4-3. So I don't know. Dan Quinn, though, has plenty of options, and that certainly is a good thing. On to the Denver Broncos. I feel comfortable putting them in B. They had a couple of picks that I just absolutely love, and it makes me want to put it in A, but Pat Surtain at 9, man, that's got to be Justin Fields or Micah Parsons. Parsons is a perfect scheme fit, and then Justin Fields, just throw darts. Maybe they think they're going to be in the running for Aaron Rodgers if he is going to be traded. And if that's the case, I thought Pat Surtain might be like the centerpiece to a trade to Green Bay, but then they take Eric Stokes, so I'm kind of left wondering if Surtain would even be a part of that. But Surtain joins a room of Ronald Darby making $10 million a year. Kyle Fuller, only on a one-year deal. I get that. But Michael Ojemudia, who they drafted in the third round last year. Bryce Callahan, you're not taking him away from the slot. Like, it's such a crowded room. I know you need a lot of corners. You're playing high-powered offenses with Kansas City, the Chargers. Even the Raiders have a good offense. So I understand. And Surtain is an improvement over Ronald Darby. But then you look at that and you're like, why did you waste the money on signing Ronald Darby? Maybe they can cut him next year. I don't have his contract in front of me, obviously. But if that's the case, then, okay, move on from him as soon as possible. And then I can look back at this pick more favorably. Surtain's a fantastic player. I have my gripes with who they should have taken there, but I can't deny Surtain's talent. They should have been take Javonte Williams. And if they don't get a quarterback like Rodgers, maybe they want to be a run-first team. Williams and Melvin Gordon. That's pretty intriguing. And then you use those wide receivers when you need to. And you're just like taking down the amount of times they need to win, and you feel comfortable with them being able to win when you call their number. I don't know. That sounds better in theory than it does in actuality, though. But I do like Javonte Williams a ton. Quinn Miners, really good value. He could be a guard or a center for this team, depending on how Lloyd Cushenberry and company pan out at their respective positions. Also like Baron Browning. They have him an outside linebacker here on ESPN. I think that is the role he should play. He gets to sit and learn behind the likes of Von Miller and Bradley Chubb. I'm all about it. That's a great spot for Baron Browning to make that move at. Jamar Johnson had some off-the-field issues, but he's a tremendous value here in the 5th round. I wonder if this means maybe Justin Simmons could eventually start playing some strong. Maybe not this season because they still have Kareem Jackson, but the next year. Maybe Simmons gets used more in that in-the-box role, which he's fantastic at. He's just also a tremendous free safety. Maybe use Johnson as a center fielder, Simmons closer to the box in a year's time. We'll have to see. Seth Williams, also a good burner, so like adding that element to the offense. But yeah, certainly a good draft class here for Denver. Cade Stearns, not a bad safety as well. Maybe there is an argument for them to go A. I just have my gripes with the Surtain pick at 9 compared to who else was on the board. Detroit Lions, I think Cleveland and Chicago were probably the clear winners, but Detroit is right there behind them in my opinion. I think they had a tremendous draft. This is a foundation building class right here. Penei Sewell, boom, plug and play right tackle of the future, opposite of Taylor Decker. Bookend tackles, Jared Goff's got to be happy about that. Levi Onwuzurike in the 2nd, Aleem McNeil in the 3rd. There's your nose tackle in McNeil, interior pass rusher in Onwuzurike of the future. You have Michael Brockers, but have those 3 guys rotate this year. Brockers is not a long-term answer, and if anything, having Brockers in the room with Onwuzurike and McNeil makes me feel better about their development. When it comes to McNeil, I know I said he's a nose tackle, but with Detroit, he's not going to see 3-man rushes as often as he did at NC State in that 3-3-5 defense, so McNeil will see less double teams. He'll win more in pass rush situations. I think Onwuzurike and McNeil are going to be really valuable parts of this team in 4 years' time. Once their rookie deals are up, I think we're going to look back at this and say, yeah, Detroit, those 2 guys, I got to keep them around. That's their identity. Also have Romeo Okwara as an edge rusher. I'm all about it. Ifeatu Melifonwu in the 3rd round, tremendous value. And everybody's saying they didn't go wide receiver. They're not helping Jared Goff. And then they go out there and get Amon-Ra St. Brown, who in any other year is a 2nd-round pick. Shoot, this year people saw him as a potential 2nd-round pick. Can play on the inside, can play on the outside. I think as a rookie, he'll play in the slot with Perriman and Williams on the outside. And then beyond this year, he eventually probably makes the move outside. Also get Derek Barnes in the 4th round. Shut up. Like, this team just put together a tremendous pick, or a tremendous draft. I don't need to drone on about it for so long, but incredible value. And that's a bite kneecaps draft class right there. That's how you build a foundation. And that way, when you do take a quarterback maybe next year, he's not just out on his own. He has pieces around him. Then we get to the Packers. And it's tough to grade this because obviously, like, what's going on with Aaron Rodgers. But I think this is going to be my first C-tier draft. I don't mind Eric Stokes, but Georgia runs a lot of man press. And then Green Bay is going to run a lot of soft zone. But Stokes has the size-speed combo, so I think he can play in space. I think he would fit fine opposite of Jair Alexander. And Kevin Keane cost you a trip to the Super Bowl, in my opinion. if not the reason why you didn't go, he is one of the largest reasons you didn't make it to the Super Bowl. So getting a replacement there helps you win now. Josh Myers felt a little early. Creed Humphrey was literally the next pick, so I would have gone Creed Humphrey. I would have gone Quinn Miners over Josh Myers. Just give up a lot of pressures at Ohio State. But nonetheless, it is a center, but also that feels a little early for a center. Again, I just don't value that position that much. Amari Rodgers, though, that's probably the best pick for this draft class. That, and then one guy we'll talk about who they took in the 7th. Amari Rodgers, that's your slot guy. I think he's an instant impact guy, immediate production. You can also use him on and around just jet sweeps. LaFleur can get creative with him. He's that kind of wide receiver. Royce Newman, fine. You know, there are a lot of these other guys, they're okay ads. And then Kylan Hill in the 7th round. That's a really solid ad. I actually saw, and I've heard people say they had a higher grade on Kylan Hill than A.J. Dillon last year. I like Dillon, but they also made it work last year with, you know, Aaron Jones, Jamal Williams, and A.J. Dillon. So why not have Jones, Dillon, and Kylan Hill this year? You know, it makes sense. And in the 7th round, he's totally worth the value. He was like my running back 6, I think. That's great value there. Then we get to the Houston Texans. I'm gonna throw them into B tier, and I know Packers fans everywhere are screaming, "How can the Texans have had a better draft than Green Bay? They had less picks." But given where this team is at, knowing your roster is key in this. Davis Mills, a guy who doesn't have to start right away, and I think this just signals Deshaun Watson is not playing in Houston this year because of the off-the-field stuff. And then long-term, I don't know. I am not entirely sure that he ever plays another down of football. Davis Mills can sit for a year or two behind Tyrod Taylor, Ryan Finley, whoever they want to try to throw out there and just tank this year. Get the number 1 overall pick, take Derek Stingley Jr. or Kayvon Thibodeau next year. Thibodeau in specific would be crazy sick if you're a Texans fan. But Mills, project QB, maybe he does see the field this year. Nico Collins, that big body guy, really like that. A lot of people were saying they could go Tylan Wallace or they could go get a burner to replace Will Fuller. But I like the idea. You already have Brandon Cooks, and he doesn't want to be traded anymore. Go get Nico Collins, developmental project X wide receiver. I think he can be a guy, maybe not immediately like crazy impactful, but kind of like Denzel Mims last year, where you start seeing his name with, you know, bigger and bigger stat lines next to it by the end of the year. Really do like Nico Collins. And then Brevin Jordan. They have a couple of, you know, tight ends on the roster, but Brevin Jordan's this combo tight end wide receiver, so he could be someone who's a tight end but also plays in the slot, like what they could do with him. So going offensive heavy in those first 3 picks, then they go with a couple of defensive players in the 5th and 6th. Overall, I just think they made out well, and given they only had 5 picks, I think they made the most of those selections. On to the Indianapolis Colts. Man, I'll give it a B, but it's anchored because Kwity Paye is just a stud, and I'm all about Kwity Paye. I think he's a tremendous fit in that 4-3 defense, high upside, freak athlete. Don't need to talk about that. Dayo Odigbo, it feels like the Titans snaked them of Dylan Radunz. Like, Radunz was their guy. Like, okay, that's the tackle. That's the last one we would want to feel comfortable taking here in the 2nd round. Maybe they should have taken Brady Christensen. That's to be argued. But they get another edge, and to be honest, this team probably could use 2. And if Dayo didn't get hurt, maybe he's not on the board in the 2nd round. Super good athlete, plays at a Power 5 conference, so there's definitely things to like about Dayo. And then later on, Sean Davis. This team could use a safety. I don't think they brought back Malik Hooker, at least the last time I checked, he's still not back. But, you know, Sean Davis could be somebody who eventually carves out a pretty substantial role early on. Same can be said about Sam Ehlinger. Jacoby Brissett's not back. They use Brissett a lot for those, you know, QB sneak, QB run type of situations. Now it's Carson Wentz instead of Phillip Rivers, so you might not have as much concern. But Wentz has battled his injuries, so I think Ehlinger, who actually was very productive on QB run situations, QB sneak spots, that he has a role pretty immediately for this team. I'm going to start picking it up. I know this is starting to get towards a longer video. Jacksonville Jaguars, here's a hot take. I didn't care for any pick they made on day 1 or 2 other than Trevor Lawrence. But they saved it in day 3 with a couple of guys. But then they also kind of bombed out. They kind of ruined it in day 3 as well. Trevor Lawrence, obviously, like that, but that pick was not made by Urban Meyer. It was made for him, right? Like, for 3 years now, we've been talking about Trevor Lawrence going number 1 overall. I did not like ETN at 25. To me, that was Barmore, Marwick, Joke, somebody. Tevin Jenkins made sense. Shoot, Elijah Moore. I don't know where he fits in that offense, but I just don't think they needed ETN in the 1st round. Why did you take running back 2 in round 1? or committee running back in round 1. Tyson Campbell, the top of the 3rd round, head scratcher. Again, I thought that was Marig, Barmore, Joe, whoever. Tyson Campbell in a crowded outside corner room with Shaquille Griffin, CJ Henderson, Sidney Jones. I don't know. I don't know where you play Tyson Campbell. He fits that man press build, but I just don't know where they're going to play him. Walker Little, I like, but I cannot tell you that he's going to play a 17-game season. Like, I like Walker Little a ton. I think he was a first-round talent type of offensive tackle. I haven't seen him play since he was a sophomore, and his sophomore tape is decent, given the projection of where he could be in 2 years' time. You know, you think he's been better. I know he's battled a lot of injuries, though, so that's a super risky second-round pick. I like the talent, but there is inherent risk with that. Andre Cisco at the top of the 3rd round. You signed Rayshawn Jenkins, so where's Cisco's role? I think Cisco could eventually become better than Jenkins, so I'm not saying, you know, don't draft Cisco because you have Jenkins, but Cisco's also just a headache. He makes a bunch of boneheaded like angles towards ball carriers, but also wherever the ball's being thrown, sometimes he just takes bad angles to the football, and that'll cost you games at the NFL level. But Jay Tufele and then Jordan Smith, they're 2 4th-round picks, both fantastic. I'm all about Jay Tufele. That's sure, you know, they signed Tyson Alualu at nose. He didn't come back. I think Tufele could play that role, or maybe he becomes like the Taven Bryan replacement. But I'm thinking it's that nose spot. And then Jordan Smith, I really like him. They have him as a DN, so maybe he's going to play 3-4 end, and that makes me feel a little bit better about him potentially seeing the field early on, rotating in with Roy Robertson Harris and that group. I was thinking maybe he was going to be an outside linebacker and then just be stuck on the bench behind K'Lavon Chaisson and Josh Allen, who I'm extremely high on both of them. So I like Jordan Smith more than most. So I was kind of bummed out when Jacksonville took him because I thought he was just going to be stuck on the bench. But instead, if he's playing that 3-4 end, I think there's some opportunities there. Then they take Luke Farrell, a tight end, way too early in the 5th, and then Jalen Camp's fine in the 6th. So maybe you could argue that they wanted, or they should be in B tier, but I, for right now, have got to put them in C. And actually, I saw something this morning saying the Jags apparently wanted Kadarius Toney at 25. Interesting. Is there that much of a difference between Kadarius Toney and Elijah Moore? That's kind of speculation, and I won't drone on about it, but too much. Anyways, moving on to the Kansas City Chiefs. You know what? I think they had a solid draft. We'll put them in B. Nick Bolton with your first, 2nd-round pick. This team is still trying to get better at the linebacking core. I think Bolton with Willie Gay Jr., that's a good young tandem, and it allows you to cut some of those veterans who make a lot of money in a year's time. Creed Humphrey needed a center. Actually, they signed Austin Blythe, so Creed Humphrey could be a guard or center. Noah Gray, really interesting tight end, really good athlete. He's not just an inline guy. He can be played in different roles. Cornell Powell, project 5th-round wide receiver. This is a team with an explosive offense, so I'm intrigued. I think Powell could be a guy who racks up some decent numbers in his rookie year, just given the offense he plays in. And then Trey Smith, if the heart clot situation, you know, it passes by, this is right up there with Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah for steal of the draft. Some people had Trey Smith going in the 2nd round. I saw him as like a 3rd, 4th, but dude, him in the 6th for a team that could get better on the interior. That is just fantastic value, but there is a bit of a concern given his health. On to the Chargers. You know what? Just given where this team, what this team did with their first 2 picks, I think it's at least A, but I think they did really good thereafter. Rashawn Slater falls in their lap at 13. Perfect. You couldn't have asked for a better situation other than maybe Penei Sewell, but I feel like they might have had Slater higher on their board. Asante Samuel Jr. in the 2nd round. You couldn't have asked for a better scheme fit and a better situation for them to, you know, it felt like the card was written for him once Asante Samuel was still on the board. And then Josh Palmer. They needed a 3rd wide receiver. I think Palmer has a lot of the skills similar to Jamar Chase, just, you know, like a tier lower. And Mike Williams is going to be a free agent at the end of this upcoming season. Palmer could replace him, save you some money there. Or you keep Williams around and you just have him, Palmer, Keenan Allen, and company as just a really good wide receiver room. Trey McKitty felt like there was another tight end they were possibly eyeing, and they were anticipating maybe some more being taken off the board. But, you know, Jared Cook's not the long-term answer. Maybe McKitty is. Chris Rumph needs to get stronger, needs to put on weight. But as an outside linebacker opposite of Uchenna Nwosu, it was a need. I think Rumph has some good production and some good tape. He just needs to get stronger. And then Brennan Hames. Turns out it's not James. It's Hames. offensive tackle. I think he fits maybe a little bit better at guard, but he also could be the right tackle to replace Brian Bulaga if he gets hurt, but also just long term. So I really like that pick as well. But he also could be used as a guard to fill in roles when people get hurt, because it's bound to happen. So tremendous weekend for the Chargers, no doubt about it, in my opinion. Then we get to the LA Rams. There was certainly some picks that I did like them making, but I'll give it a B. I'll go into B. I really wanted to go C. I'm just not crazy about the Tutu Atwell pick. I think they could have gone someone like Elijah Molden, who I had them mocked taking, and I felt like that would be a really good fit for where that defense, what they lost in John Johnson III and Troy Hill. Tutu Atwell is just one more guy in a crowded wide receiver room as is. Also, he's a slot guy, so where do you play Cooper Kupp? Are you playing Kupp somewhere other than the slot? Or are you just going 4 wide and you have 2 slot guys? I don't know. A lot of people saying Tutu Atwell makes you think of Deshaun Jackson, but Deshaun Jackson also like 6 foot, a little bit bigger than Tutu Atwell is. Atwell at the medical pro day was like 148 pounds. That inherently is kind of scary. We were so concerned about Devonta Smith's weight. Well, what about Tutu Atwell's? But he is electric. He is a downfield threat. And if people see him as the second coming of Deshaun Jackson, well, he gets to play with Deshaun Jackson and learn from a guy who's put together a really solid career when he's been able to stay healthy. Ernest Jones, good value. I think a linebacker that I saw going early day 3, but at the very end of day 2, don't mind that pick at all. He was asked to do a lot of different things in South Carolina. Maybe with a more refined, smaller role, it's a better situation for him to succeed, plus big position of need. Bobby Brown, needed a defensive tackle. You moved on from Michael Brockers, like that pick. But my favorite pick for this team is Robert Rochelle. Athletic freak. And now he gets to learn from Darius Williams, Jalen Ramsey and company. Whew. And Raheem Morris, who's their defensive coordinator. I'm all about it. In 2 years' time, watch out. Robert Rochelle is going to be a damn good player. Also, Ben Skoranek, kind of like a baby Chase Claypool. Big body, not a great route runner per se. Claypool's a little bit better of a separator, but he's going to win at the catch point and with contested catch situations. So maybe a red zone guy this team just doesn't have. Given Van Jefferson's 6 foot, Robert Woods is around that, and then Cooper Kupp's a slot guy and 5'11". So could be a guy who adds a little bit of a different element, and maybe just kind of like a not inline tight end type of situation. So, but nonetheless, I think it was an okay weekend for the Rams. I contemplated putting them in C, but looking over it again, I'm kind of happy with them in B. Now we get to the Raiders. This one's also a tricky one because Alex Leatherwood was way too early, and then they trade up to get Trevon Moehrig, who somehow was the third third safety off the board. Don't know how that happened. I'm still going to put him in C. If you reverse the order of Moehrig and Leatherwood, I would look at this as like really good first and second round. But then Malcolm Kuntz was a little early. They are so already addressed edge a lot. I really wanted them to see them use their draft capital in position groups other than where they spend a ton of money. Feels like they're just throwing darts at a board, and that's fine when you only have a few holes. But they're just throwing darts at specific holes and just leaving other areas of need disregarded, and that's concerning. Divine Diablo, though, I do like him potentially as a sub linebacker, safety linebacker, Derwin James type of position for Gus Bradley. All about Divine Diablo. I think that's a tremendous value. And then they take Tyree Gillespie, a third safety in the class, though like I said, Diablo I think is going to play more linebacker. I just don't know where they use Gillespie. You also have Jonathan Abrams, so even though I liked the Diablo pick, what are you doing with Jonathan Abrams? I don't know. It's just a really questionable draft. Love Moehrig. That's by far the best pick this team made. On to the Miami Dolphins. I think they put together a really solid draft class. Maybe not as crazy as we could have thought it was, or depending on how the mocks shake out, as wild as we anticipated it being. They didn't go running back. I know a lot of Dolphins fans are really irritated with that, but there are still some UDFA options out there. Also, maybe just the committee. I don't think Gaskins was that bad last year. Savon Ahmed was okay when he got playing time, so maybe just a committee approach is going to be enough. Brian Flores comes from that Belichick tree. They love those committees, so maybe that's the route they're trying to take. But looking at this draft class, Jalen Waddle, super high upside wide receiver. You've heard it 1,000 times, and also I think he's just if they took Jamar Chase, I'm not going to fight that because he's the best wide receiver in this class. Or if they got Kyle Pitts, best pass catcher in the class, carve out a role. But they don't have a guy to play on the inside. Chase could have, I'm sure, played that role, but it would have been different. Will Fuller, I'm sure, could have been a field stretching slot. I almost kind of interested to see how that could have played out. But Jalen Waddle had all his success at Alabama as a slot wide receiver, and a lot of people's knocks on him was he wasn't facing press coverage. Well, now he doesn't have to. He's going to play in the slot with Will Fuller next to him and Devontae Parker also on the outside. So I think it's a tremendous fit. Also a guy who does a ton after the catch. You can give him the ball short and let him make the game easy for Tua. Jalen Phillips, my edge one. Thought he fit a little bit better in a 4-3, but I think in a 3-4 he's going to be just fine. He's a tremendous player, scheme versatile. I'm all about it. Javon Holland. This was one that made me smile because I am a huge Javon Holland fan. I felt like I was higher on him than anybody else, but clearly not the Miami front office. They saw what I saw. Probably going to play more free safety, which this team needed to get younger at safety, get some improvements there anyways. You signed Justin Coleman. You drafted Noah Igbenogany, 30th overall last year. So I think they have some options there at nickel corner. So I think Holland is going to play free safety. But ideally, try to use him in different roles. That's how you'll maximize the value. But I think Holland, his break on the football, his ability to read QBs as a deep safety, also playing for Brian Flores is going to help. I love that pick. Maybe Trevon Merrick, a lot of people are going to say he's safety one in the class. I'm not going to argue it, but I'm a huge Javon Holland fan. I felt like it was closer than a lot of people wanted to recognize it as. Liam Eichenberg, really like this fit. I think he could be the right tackle. He obviously played left tackle at Notre Dame, blindside protector for Ian Book. Could have a similar role at right tackle. And I know he's got the shorter arms, but at right tackle, going against, defensive ends on the other side of the line that typically left tackles face the top tier edge guy. We're kind of talking generally here, but typically left tackles have the harder assignment. Right tackles get a little bit easier. That might help alleviate the short arm concerns for Eichenberg. And then Hunter Long's fine. Pretty solid blocker. Kyle Rudolph build is, that's kind of been my comp. He's Kyle Rudolph. And then they didn't pick again until the 7th round. They took, some okay options, some good depth pieces. So really solid draft class. Felt like this was going to be a team that was destined for the S tier, though, so I can't help but feel a little disappointed. And then we get to the Minnesota Vikings. And, I said earlier it was the Browns and the Bears within the Lions right after them. The Vikings might actually be just ahead of the Lions, just given this is a win-now caliber team, and they made some fantastic moves. But, dude, shout out to the AFC North with the Browns and the Ravens, and then the NFC North with the Vikings and the Bears. Christian Darrisaw, dude, they fleeced. I don't want to say they fleeced the Jets because the Jets still got a good player, but they gained 2 extra thirds. And then they still got their guy, Christian Darrisaw, plug-and-play left tackle, tremendous fit. You've heard me say it 1,000 times. That's an A-plus move. And then these 4 third-round picks they have. Kellen Mond, QB the future. You have Kirk Cousins under contract for 2 more years. That's exactly about the time period I would want Kellen Mond to sit. And he gets to learn from a guy who is as consistent as it gets. Like, no matter what your knock on Kirk Cousins is, you can't tell me he's not consistent. He's always been that, B-tier guy. So, all about it. Very accurate thrower of the football. Hopefully that helps out Kellen Mond. Chaz Surratt, I'm a huge Chaz Surratt fan. Very fast, very twitchy. QB turned linebacker. Understands where offenses are trying to go. He understands the game at a high level. Needs to improve upon as a tackler. And he gets to work with Anthony Barr and Eric Kendricks. Yeah, that feels like a couple of good mentors. Also, this is like, as Mond is to Kirk Cousins in 2 years' time, Surratt is to Anthony Barr after this season. He is that replacement. Wyatt Davis, plug-and-play guards. They go Darrisaw, they go Wyatt Davis. Feeling really great about that left side of the offensive line now. Patrick Jones, I think that's a good pick. They go take a running back in the 4th. This is a team that I trust. When they take running back, I just trust their talent. Cameron Bynum, he's fine. Janarius Robinson, actually, I think. Him and Patrick Jones. Guys who, later round guys, but in a few years' time, we could look at and say, there's Minnesota doing again. Mid-round guys that develop into plus-level starters. More so Janarius Robinson because he's coming from Florida State, and I felt like the Seminoles program just has not become, or isn't what it used to be when it comes to developing players. So with that said, I feel like Janarius Robinson going to a team that, just like they have an eye for running backs, they have an eye for 4-3 DNs, and I really like what Robinson could become for this team. Jalen Twyman in the 6th round, also a noteworthy pick. Nose tackle, could rotate in with Michael Pierce and Dalvin Tomlinson. But this is an S-tier draft. The Vikings, fantastic weekend. And you know who else put together a really great weekend? The New England Patriots. And like I said, you're not going to see any D-tier teams. I think everybody got better this weekend. I think these 3 teams and a couple more we're going to talk about made some questionable decisions and didn't get as good as they should have. But with the New England Patriots, they don't have to trade up to get a QB of the future in Mac Jones. He could start right away. You also have Cam Newton, so you don't have to rush him in. But I think Jones does have that immediacy factor to him where he is ready to go, plug and play, week 1 starter. And I know everybody's saying, oh, the offense was built for Cam Newton. Trey Lance should have been their guy. Do we not remember Tom Brady being fantastic, putting up insane numbers with two tight end offense with Aaron Hernandez and Rob Gronkowski, and then the wide receivers being Wes Welker, Randy Moss? Like, I think Mac Jones will be just fine with those pass catchers being tight ends instead of wide receivers. I think it's going to be A-okay. Also, at Alabama, he had a great running game and a fantastic offensive line in front of him. I think in New England, we're going to talk about one of the running backs they took later on, but okay, we're going to talk about him now. Ramondre Stevenson, fantastic value in the 4th round. Pair him with Damian Harris. I'm all about that. Those two leading that running back group behind a fantastic offensive line, sign me up. This team should be run first. Set up play action for Mac Jones or Cam Newton, whoever it is. I like where this offense is heading. Then they trade up and get Christian Barmore in the 2nd round. The fact Barmore is on the board, automatically an A+ move. Ronnie Perkins somehow falls to them with the 33rd pick in the 3rd round. How? Bill Belichick just makes another fantastic steal of the draft. We already talked about Ramondre Stevenson, this guy who's built like a power back, but honestly plays and moves like a shifty, more elusive build, but it works. So he has that best of both worlds kind of blend. I'm all about it. Him and Damian Harrison, I think, are going to be fantastic. Then they get Cameron McGrone, very athletic, very good tackler. This is the type of linebacker I think is safe to take in the 5th round. Needs to get better in coverage, and he's going to a team that has a great history and tradition at the linebacking group. That's just a position Bill Belichick knows how to work with, and I'm really excited to see what he could do. Also, Matt Patricia has a pretty decent track record as a defensive coordinator, working with linebackers. So, fantastic draft for New England. On to New Orleans. Yeah, this is going to be another one of those C-tier classes. Peyton Turner, I know what they see in him, and I know they're high on him, and he has the skill set to get there, but you also just picked up the 5th-year option on Marcus Davenport, so you got him for this year and next year. If he takes the step forward that I think he will this year, I don't know how big of a role you really have with Peyton Turner. Do you take your Trey Hendrickson small-ish rotational role in the 1st round? I think not. I think you take Elijah Moore. You think you take corner Asante Samuel, somebody there. Or linebacker Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah felt like he would have been a tremendous fit. So I don't know. I know what they like in Turner, but also only 4 games played, battled a lot of injuries. It's kind of a head scratcher. Pete Werner, I think he's a good player. AJ Hawk has been the comp for a lot of people. One, because he went to Ohio State, but also he just doesn't do anything great, but he does everything well. Jack of all trades, master of none kind of guy. Solid pick, maybe a little early in the 2nd round. Paulson Adebo, though, I like that pick, all about it. That's solid value in the 3rd round. Ian Book in the 4th felt a little earlier. I didn't think Book was going to come off the board until the 6th, maybe the end of the 5th earliest, but clearly I was wrong and out of the loop there. And now you add Ian Book to Taysom Hill and Jameis Winston. I don't know what Sean Payton's doing in that QB room, but I am interested. But I think they might have had the weakest draft class of anybody in the NFL. I don't know. I'm just not a big fan of it. Giants, I got to give them an A. Fantastic weekend, right? They trade down, get assets for the future, which is obviously great. This team is in a position to win now if Daniel Jones is good. Like, if Daniel Jones can be an above-average quarterback, this is a playoff caliber roster. They get Kadarius Toney, add that wide receiver room. It feels like the baby Waddle. Waddle wasn't going to be available at 11. They got leapfrogged, missed out on Devonta Smith. So they trade down and get the baby Waddle and Kadarius Toney. Super twitchy. Need to improve upon his route tree. He ran a lot of option routes, but nonetheless, there's plenty to work with. You can give him the ball short, underneath passes, make it easy for Daniel Jones, and let Kadarius Toney work after the catch. Azeez Ojulari, if it wasn't for the degenerative knee thing that popped up 2 days before the draft, he's locked in the 1st round. So you have the injury concern, but a perfect scheme fit. Really couldn't have asked for a better fit for Azeez Ojulari. They trade up and get Aaron Robinson, who they have Darnay Holmes, but with this team, I kept saying, don't let Darius Slayton prevent you from taking Jalen Waddle. Don't let a late-round guy like Darnay Holmes, who I think can be a good nickel corner, prevent you from getting Aaron Robinson, who we know, man press ability, is a fantastic slot guy, but he also has the potential to maybe play on the outside, especially with Adoree Jackson having a lot of injuries in his playing career. Robinson could carve out a role for himself on the outside. At UCF, they used him in both of those, intermittent. So hopefully it's just like one role you're going to play in this spot, and then maybe next year or whatever they want to do. Hopefully they're just changing him in and out in a game. That's what UCF did. Sometimes he'd be nickel outside, nickel outside. And doing that throughout a game is challenging, no doubt about it. Ellerson Smith, another edge guy. They're throwing darts. This is an example of you don't have that many needs. Throw darts, find an option that sticks. And the Giants did just that, so I give them an A. Then we get to the New York Jets, and you know what? I really like what they did as well. They traded up and gave up a fair amount of value for Elijah Vera Tucker. You know what? I gotta put him in S. One, you get the franchise QB and Zach Wilson. Amazing value. They did give up the 2 threes for Elijah Vera Tucker, but this is a team that has so many draft assets that if they felt like Elijah Vera Tucker is their right tackle of the future, opposite of Mekhi Becton, bookend tackles, I'm here for it. But even if he's not, and he's just a great left guard, you are completely protecting the blind side for Zach Wilson with Mekhi Becton next to Elijah Vera Tucker. So it was an expensive move up, and you don't normally move up for guards, especially in the first round. But knowing your roster and knowing you're trying to protect and get the most out of Zach Wilson, this regime is trying to learn from the mistake that the prior Jet regime did with Sam Darnold. They're trying to protect but also get weapons for Zach Wilson, which, top of the second round, one of the best value picks. Elijah Moore can play on the outside, but at the minimum, field stretching slot guy, great hands, polished route runner. It's just tremendous. It's amazing that he was there. Michael Carter, him and maybe Tevin Coleman, Michael Pirine. This is going to be a team that uses a committee, but Michael Carter fits in really well with what this team wants to do. One of the quickest one-cuts in this draft class. I love that pick. They also take Michael Carter, the safety from Duke. And then also Hamsah Nasir-Deline. Amazing value in the 6th. So hats off to the Jets. All these teams that had so many of these holes got so much better. And the same can be said about the Philadelphia Eagles. Yeah, I'm going to do it. I'm going to put them in S tier too. I think this is because of how good of a draft class this was. There's so much talent spread throughout the draft itself. But man, a ton of teams made big improvements. And a lot of them are rebuild teams, like the Eagles, the Lions, you say could be in the same spot, the Jets as well. They made improvements across the board that make them a significantly better and more competitive football team. Devonta Smith, they trade up and get their guy. Him and Jalen Reagor, I think, are going to be a really solid wide receiver duo, and I like the aggressiveness. Move up 2 picks, make sure the Giants can't steal your guy from you. Landon Dickerson has injury concerns, but they do need a Jason Kelce replacement one day. They do need a Brandon Brooks replacement. He's battled a ton of injuries, and they could also use a left guard in general. So I think Dickerson has a role for him at one of those spots. Milton Williams, I love Milton Williams. Athletic freak, interior disruptor. And this team is getting older across the defensive line with guys like Fletcher Cox. Really, the only young guy is Derek Barnett, and even he's, I think, in his high 20s. So getting younger across the defensive line is going to be great. Also, those guys make a ton of money, so try to phase those guys out so you can become active in free agency in a few years' time. Zach McPherson, cornerback, needed that. Wish you could have maybe gotten one a little earlier, but nonetheless, not bad. Kenneth Gainwell, an amazing pass-catching running back. Him and Miles Sanders, love that duo. Marlon Tuipulotu, he's your nose tackle next to Milton Williams, building a nice unit on the interior between those two. Teron Jackson, the most productive edge rusher for one of the best defenses in the country at Coastal Carolina. You take him in the 6th round, low risk. I don't think the Eagles made a bad pick this weekend, so got to put him in S tier. Then we get to my favorite team. I really contemplated putting the Steelers in B, but I cannot let my bias shine through. I think they're right there. If I were to grade these out, and again, talking about the Jags, outside of the pick made for him and Trevor Lawrence, I don't really care for a lot of the moves that Urban Meyer made. Some of the day 3 guys were okay, but maybe this is how I'd play out the C tier, maybe from worst to best, right to left. But Najee Harris, I am okay with taking your running back in the 1st round when he's that good. And I still, like I did in all my mocks, I felt like there was a pathway for the Steelers to put together a great draft class, an A-tier class, with still taking Najee Harris in round 1. Obviously, a big improvement over Benny Snell and Anthony McFarland. But Pat Freiermuth in the 2nd round was such an interesting move because Creed Humphrey's on the board. I was like, all right, boom, there's our center. Quinn Miner's available. It could be him too. tight ends just typically aren't productive in their rookie year, typically. And you also already have Eric Ebron. Though Eric Ebron tied for the most drops of any tight end in football, so I'm all about phasing Ebron out, getting Freiermuth the ball more. But he's not a great run blocker, so in those 2 tight end sets, neither one of Ebron or Freiermuth are going to be great for helping out Najee Harris. But just given the trend with tight ends, they're not impactful as a rookie. So for a team that's trying to do everything they can to win now, this was not a very win now move. So it was head scratching. I like Freiermuth, tough football player, good fit, Penn State guy staying in the state. I like that, but for where this team is at, knowing the roster, that pick could have been used elsewhere. Kendrick Green, great run blocking center. I think that's a good pick. Dan Moore, a lot of people were saying, any other year he's a second round tackle, but we're not talking about any other year. And because you went Freiermuth in the second, if you really wanted to go tackle, it felt like you ignored other needs or other tackle options and then settled for Dan Moore later. But maybe Dan Moore can't compete in camp and make me swallow my words, and he can start over Chukwuma Okorafor. We'll see. At the minimum, maybe he sits for a year behind Chugs. Banner has some injury history or injury concerns in his history. Maybe Moore fills in where there's injuries. I just don't know. Relying on a 4th round tackle is not going to be something that is viable for a lot of teams who want to win a Super Bowl this year. Isaiah Loudermilk, they give up a future 4 to get into the 5th round, and they take a guy who's just going to be a nose tackle. I guess that's fine. I don't know. He wasn't on a lot of guys' boards either. Quincy Roche is solid value, but I think he's just an rotational guy behind Alex Highsmith, and T.J. Watt. So, it's good value, but he also has a small role, so nothing wild. And then Trey Norwood, they wait until the 7th round to get a corner, and he's gotten a lot of interceptions at Oklahoma, but there's also a ton of concerns there. And then they draft a big punter. So, a lot of people who are against drafting special teams guys, you're not going to like that pick, but punting's been a bit of a headache for Steelers fans, so I'm actually not as anti Presley Harvin III as many. And plus, he's just a huge dude, Ray Guy winner. I'm all about it. Welcome to Pittsburgh, my guy. But yeah, this draft should have played out better. Just even with Najee Harris going in the 1st round, this draft could have played out better. But you play with the cards you're dealt. Maybe this team should have gone Asante Samuel Jr. round 1, and maybe Michael Carter round 2 or 3. It's kind of interesting to think about, but we will see. Moving on to the Seattle Seahawks. Considering they only had 3 picks, I'm surprised in myself being able to do this. Dwayne Eskridge, fantastic slot guy, also has some experience playing on the outside, so that's in play. But him in the slot with Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf on the outside, weapons for Russell Wilson. Sign me up. Trey Brown, kind of a small guy. But outside of his size concerns, I think he plays pretty well. I know this is a total break from the norm for Seattle. They want those 6'1", 6'2", 6'3" corners. They settle for a small guy, but I think Brown can find a way to be productive, maybe at least as a nickel corner. And then Stone Forsythe, they trade up and get Stone Forsythe, so huge tackle, maybe a little too big. There's been times where people get underneath them, but also didn't allow that many sacks. Didn't seem to be, it wasn't a problem that showed up a ton on tape. It wasn't a glaring weakness that you made note of. So he gets to learn from Dwayne Brown and potentially become the long-term left tackle. Okay, Russell Wilson should be happy with that pick too. I think that was great value in the 6th. On to the San Francisco 49ers. I'll put him in A tier. I mean, Trey Lance, I'm glad they made the Lance pick over Mac Jones. I think Fields, I might put this in S, but I still like Lance. Young guy. He was Kyle Shanahan's guy all the way. Super smart as well. Aaron Banks. Maybe there's a bit of a scheme change between Banks and then also Trey Sermon in the 3rd. I've seen some people talking about that. Interesting, but I like Banks. I think he is a good guard. This team needed a guard. Makes sense. This team values running back in the sense of having a lot of different options. Sermon, big bully, maybe someone they don't have right now. Him and Raheem Mostert complement each other pretty well. Ambry Thomas in the 3rd round, really solid value. I like that a lot. So I think this team addressed its biggest needs and certainly positioned themselves as Super Bowl contenders, no doubt about it. Tampa Bay Buccaneers are next. I'll put them in B tier. I like Joe Tryon a lot. Guy who's opted out in 2020. You feel like you need some more reps to get better, so it's kind of unfortunate he's going to have to sit a year or he's going to have a smaller role because of the likes of Jason Pierre-Paul and Shaq Barrett. But there's also 2 guys for Tryon to lean on and learn from. So I like that fit. It's a good landing spot for him. Kyle Trask gets to sit for 2 years behind the greatest quarterback of all time, most accomplished guy to ever do it, and Tom Brady, a guy who isn't super mobile. When the play goes off script, coming out of Michigan, wasn't fantastic when the play broke down. So Trask kind of has those similar weaknesses. Feels like a good pairing there. Robert Hainsey, I think he could be a good right tackle, but I think it's probably more of a guard in the future. You have guys like, Ali Marpet, Ryan Jensen, who battled injuries, also make a lot of money. Hainsey could eventually be a cheaper replacement for one of those guys in the interior. Jalen Darden, add a wide receiver in the room. I like that. And overall, I think it was just a solid draft class. This team did what it needed. Also made picks for the future, which I am all about. Only a couple teams left. The Tennessee Titans, I'll also put them in B. Caleb Farley, obviously a risky play. If he fell to them and there was no injury concerns, it's an A, no doubt. Farley, stellar when it comes to his talent and his upside and his athletic ability, but the back injuries obviously are a red flag. Dylan Radunz, plug-and-play right tackle. This forgives, the Isaiah Wilson pick from a year ago. Monty Rice was maybe a little early, but then they make up for it with Elijah Molden. I don't know what they're going to do with Christian Fulton, Molden, their safeties. I don't know if Molden's a safety or their nickel guy. If Fulton's their nickel guy, maybe Molden moves back to safety, but they also addressed that position last year, but I don't know. They're finding answers in the secondary, which is one of the weaker points of this team, and I give credit. Molden is a chess piece, can do a lot of different things. I love the pick. Des Fitzpatrick, big body guy, maybe someone who could replace Josh Reynolds in a year's time. I wouldn't be surprised. Rashad Weaver, good value in the 4th round as well. And Brady Breeze, a fantastic name. The final pick the Titans made. I mean, sign me up. Good class there for Tennessee. They, took care of some of their weaknesses and have certainly positioned themselves to be contenders in the AFC. Last but not least, the Washington football team. I'm going to shock some people and give it an S. I think this team, again, is one of the biggest winners of the class. Jamin Davis felt like maybe a little surprising with Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah available. Christian Darrisaw was there. But Jamin Davis was Ron Rivera and Del Rio's #1 defensive player in the class. Wow. And those are two guys who played linebacker at very high levels at the NFL. So I trust their eye for that position. Jamin Davis, I said it in my first round grades video. Let me know if you think this is too hot of a take. I think if everything works out right, he's coached up perfectly, he's a more athletic Luke Kuechly. I really see that as a potential option for the career of Jamin Davis. Obviously, a high learning curve, got better week by week at Kentucky, athletic freak, yoked out of his mind. If he continues to learn the position and gets better with every rep, watch out. That dude is going to be a menace in the NFC East. Samuel Cosmi, super high, what a great athlete given his size, like 6'7", runs a 4.85 40. I mean, just remarkable what he can do given his size. But he also 90+ PFF pass grade last year. There's some things that need to be refined with his technique, but he has the production to go with insane athletic ability. He's available in the 2nd round. Sprint the card in. For a team that needs a left tackle, you don't waste any time. Then they get Benjamin St-Juste, who man press corner, 6'3", has the build. Also, good athlete. You don't need him to start right away. I think Kendall Fuller might eventually make the move to safety. And if that happens, St-Juste could become an outside corner opposite of William Jackson. They also have Fabian Morrow in the building. But I like the St-Juste pick. And then one of the best values in the class, their 2nd, 3rd round picks, De'Ami Brown. So you have Brown, McLaurin, and Curtis Samuel. Samuel in the slot, also a gadget role. Terry McLaurin does it all. De'Ami Brown, I think you need to add to his route tree, but an explosive, big play waiting to happen type of dude. That's an electric group right there. For Ryan Fitzpatrick, those are the weapons you want around him. And you got his blindside left tackle. Yeah. Oh, that's fantastic. John Bates, maybe a little early of a pick there, but overall, I think this team addressed their biggest needs, and they won. Like the first 3 rounds where you need to be great, the Washington football team was fantastic. But that's going to do it. There's my tier ranking for each team's draft performance last week. Comment down below who you think were the winners and who were the losers. Who do I have too high? Who do I have too low? What do you think of your team's draft class? All the fun questions I ask every video. Hopefully you all enjoyed. If you did, please hit that like button. It would mean the world to me. And if you're new to the channel, like sports, please consider subscribing. That's going to do it for the vid. Hope you all enjoyed. Until next time, my name is Tej. I'm signing off.
I'm part of the last generation that remembers time of God.